The cold night air bit through Zara's elegant black dress as she stood on the marble steps of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, watching through the massive glass doors as crystal chandeliers cast golden light over laughing socialites inside. Her breath came out in small puffs of white vapor, but the chill she felt had nothing to do with the weather. 20 minutes ago she had walked up these same steps with confidence, her arm linked with one of the city's most powerful men. Now she stood alone, banned from entering, while he remained inside completely unaware that she had been cast out like yesterday's trash. "Ma'am, I've told you 3 times already," the security guard said, his voice tired but firm. "Your name is not on the guest list. You need to leave the premises." Zara's hands trembled as she held up the cream-colored invitation with gold lettering. "But I have this. Look, it says right here, the Hartwell Foundation Annual Charity Gala. Table 12. The guard barely glanced at the invitation. "Anyone can print those. Your name isn't in our system. Zara Williams, no record found." "That's impossible," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I was added to the list 3 days ago." Through the glass, she could see Ryan standing near the bar, his tall frame elegant in his black tuxedo. He was laughing at something a gray-haired man was saying, completely absorbed in conversation. He had no idea that the woman he had hired to be his companion for the evening was now being treated like an intruder trying to crash the party. The worst part wasn't the security guard's dismissive tone or the way other guests walking past gave her suspicious looks. The worst part was the creeping realization that someone had deliberately done this to her. Someone with enough power and influence to have her name scrubbed from the guest list had wanted her humiliated. Someone wanted her to fail. "Please," she said to the guard, hating how desperate she sounded. "Just call inside and ask for Ryan Mitchell. He's expecting me." The guard shook his head. "I can't disturb the guests unless there's an emergency. You need to contact him yourself if you know him." But Zara's phone had died an hour ago, and she hadn't thought to bring a charger. She had been so focused on looking perfect, on playing her part convincingly, that she hadn't prepared for anything to go wrong. Now she was trapped outside while the man who had hired her continued with his evening, probably wondering where she had disappeared to. A couple in expensive clothes walked past her toward the entrance, the woman's fur coat brushing against Zara's arm. They spoke in hushed tones, but she caught fragments of their conversation. "Don't know how these people think they can just walk in. Probably saw it on social media and thought she could pretend." The shame burned in her chest like acid. These people didn't know her story, didn't know that she was here legitimately, that she had every right to be inside. All they saw was a young black woman being denied entry, and they automatically assumed she was trying to scam her way into an event she didn't belong at. Zara closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. 3 days ago, this had seemed like the answer to all her problems. One evening of playing the role of a billionaire's girlfriend, and she would earn enough money to cover her grandmother's medical bills for the next 6 months. It was supposed to be simple, professional, fake but convincing. She had studied Ryan Mitchell's biography, practiced small talk about his tech company, even learned about his charity work so she could hold intelligent conversations with his associates. She had never expected to actually like him. And she certainly hadn't expected someone to sabotage her before the evening even really began. The security guard was talking into his radio now, probably calling for backup to remove her if she didn't leave voluntarily. Zara looked through the glass one more time, memorizing the sight of Ryan in his element, surrounded by the kind of wealth and power she had only ever seen in movies. In a few hours, this would all be over and she would go back to her tiny apartment and her stack of unpaid bills. But right now, standing in the cold while warmth and luxury glowed just beyond her reach, she felt more alone than she had ever felt in her life. The glass doors reflected her image back at her, a beautiful woman in an expensive dress that she had borrowed from the styling service, jewelry that wasn't hers sparkling at her throat and wrists, looking every inch like she belonged in that glittering world inside. But appearances, she was learning, meant nothing when someone with real power decided you didn't deserve to be included. A valet approached the security guard and whispered something in his ear. The guard nodded and turned back to Zara with a final, dismissive gesture. "Ma'am, you need to leave now or I'll have to call the police." As Zara walked away from the hotel, her heels clicking against the pavement with each step taking her further from the warmth and light inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that this humiliation was just the beginning of something much bigger. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to make sure she would be embarrassed tonight. The question was who, and more importantly, why. 3 days earlier, Zara had stood in the sleek downtown office of Elite Companions, her palms sweating as she faced the woman who could change her life with a single phone call. The office smelled like expensive perfume and fresh flowers, a far cry from the cramped unemployment office where she had spent most of her mornings lately. "You understand this is not what you might think," Elena Vasquez said, her red nails tapping against the glass desk. Elena was the kind of woman who commanded attention without trying, perfectly styled silver hair, designer clothes that probably cost more than Zara's rent, and eyes that seemed to see everything. Elite companions provide sophisticated companionship for business and social events. Nothing more, nothing less. Zara nodded, trying to look more confident than she felt. "I understand completely. I just need to know if the payment is really what you mentioned on the phone." $5,000 for one evening, Elena confirmed, plus a clothing allowance and professional styling. The client is very particular about presentation. $5,000. The number made Zara's heart race. It was more money than she had made in the past 3 months combined. It was enough to pay for her grandmother's heart medication for half a year, enough to catch up on rent, enough to maybe even take a real acting class instead of watching YouTube tutorials in her apartment. "Tell me about the client," Zara said, settling back in the leather chair. Elena pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the desk. "Ryan Mitchell. 32 years old, founder and CEO of Mitchell Technologies. Net worth approximately $2.8 billion. He needs a companion for the Hartwell Foundation annual charity gala this Saturday." Zara opened the folder and found herself looking at professional photos of one of the most handsome men she had ever seen. Ryan had dark hair, kind eyes, and the sort of confident smile that suggested he was used to getting what he wanted. But there was something else in his expression, something that looked almost lonely. "Why does a billionaire need to hire a date?" she asked, then immediately worried the question sounded judgmental. Elena's smile was knowing. "Mr. Mitchell is very focused on his business. He doesn't have time for the complications of a real relationship, but his public image requires him to appear settled and social. The charity world especially values couples who appear committed to each other and to causes. So I would be pretending to be his girlfriend? You would be his companion for the evening. How you choose to present that relationship is up to the two of you, but yes, most people will assume you're romantically involved. Can you handle that convincingly?" Zara thought about her grandmother lying in the hospital bed, about the stack of medical bills on her kitchen table, about the casting calls she couldn't afford to travel to because her car had been repossessed last month. "Yes, I can handle it." Elena studied her for a long moment. "You're very beautiful, Zara, but this client specifically requested someone with intelligence and poise. The people at this gala are some of the most powerful individuals in the city. You'll need to hold conversations about business, politics, art, charity work. Can you do that?" "I have a college degree in communications," Zara said. "I've been working as a freelance event coordinator when I can find jobs. I know how to talk to people." "Good. And you understand that this is a one-time arrangement? Mr. Mitchell has been very clear that he's not looking for an ongoing relationship of any kind." Something about that statement made Zara feel oddly disappointed, which was ridiculous since she had never even met the man. Of course. One evening, totally professional. Elena made notes in Zara's file. "Excellent. You'll need to be available tomorrow for styling and briefing. We'll provide you with background information about Mr. Mitchell's business and interests, as well as details about the gala itself. You'll meet him for the first time on Saturday evening." As Zara walked out of the office with a contract in her hand and a check for half the payment up front, she felt like she was walking into a dream. For one night, she would live in a world of luxury and power, pretending to be the kind of woman who belonged on the arm of a billionaire. It was just acting, she told herself. She had been preparing for roles like this her whole life. But as she sat on the bus ride home, looking at Ryan Mitchell's photo again, she couldn't shake the feeling that this arrangement might be more complicated than either of them expected. There was something in his eyes that made her think he might be as lonely as she was, just with a much bigger bank account. The next day, Zara spent hours researching everything she could find about Ryan Mitchell online. She learned about his company's innovative software that helped small businesses manage their operations. She read about his charitable donations, his love of classical music, his tendency to avoid the party scene that many wealthy young men gravitated toward. The more she learned about him, the more curious she became. Here was a man who had everything money could buy, but who needed to hire someone to accompany him to social events. Either he was incredibly shy, incredibly picky, or incredibly lonely. Maybe all three. By Saturday afternoon, as she sat in the styling chair getting her hair and makeup done by professionals who probably charged more for one session than she usually made in a week, Zara found herself genuinely excited to meet Ryan Mitchell. Not just because of the money, though that was still her primary motivation, but because she was curious about the man behind the billionaire image. She had no way of knowing that in just a few hours she would be standing outside in the cold, humiliated and alone, while he remained inside completely unaware of what was happening to her. She had no way of knowing that someone was already planning to make sure this evening would be anything but the simple, professional arrangement they had both agreed to. The morning of the gala, Zara woke up in a hotel room that cost more per night than she usually spent on groceries in a month. Elena had insisted that she stay downtown the night before to be close to the styling team, and Zara had to admit there was something magical about waking up to room service coffee and a view of the city skyline. Her phone buzzed with a text from her grandmother's nurse. "She's doing well today. Asking about your big audition tonight. I told her you're going to be wonderful." Zara smiled, grateful that Nana believed she was going to an important audition rather than a paid companionship job. It wasn't exactly a lie, she would be performing tonight, just not on a stage. At 10 o'clock, a team of 3 stylists arrived at her hotel room with garment bags, makeup cases, and enough hair products to stock a salon. The lead stylist, an energetic woman named Carmen, took one look at Zara and clapped her hands together. "Oh honey, we are going to have so much fun with you," Carmen said. "Mr. Mitchell has excellent taste. You're going to be absolutely stunning." They started with the dress, a midnight blue gown that hugged Zara's curves perfectly and flowed like liquid silk when she moved. It was the most expensive thing she had ever worn, and when she looked at herself in the full-length mirror, she barely recognized the elegant woman staring back at her. "The color brings out your eyes," said Maria, the makeup artist, as she began working on Zara's face with brushes and products that probably cost more than Zara's monthly phone bill. "And your skin is absolutely gorgeous. We're just going to enhance what's already perfect." While Maria worked on her makeup, Carmen's assistant worked on her hair, creating soft waves that looked effortless but probably took an hour to achieve. The third stylist, James, presented her with jewelry options: diamond earrings, a delicate necklace, a bracelet that caught the light with every movement. "These are all real, right?" Zara asked, suddenly nervous about wearing thousands of dollars worth of jewelry. "Everything's insured, don't worry," James assured her. "Mr. Mitchell wants you to feel completely comfortable and confident tonight." As the team worked, they chatted about the gala, filling Zara in on details that hadn't been in her briefing materials. She learned that this particular charity event was one of the most exclusive in the city, that tickets cost $10,000 each, and that the guest list read like a who's who of business and political leaders. "You nervous?" Carmen asked as she made final adjustments to Zara's dress. "A little," Zara admitted. "I've never been around people with this much money before." "They're just people," Maria said, stepping back to admire her makeup work. "Rich people but still people. They put their pants on one leg at a time, same as everyone else. Just remember, you belong there as much as anyone else does." At 3 o'clock, Elena arrived to give Zara her final briefing. They went over Ryan's background again, discussed conversation topics that would be appropriate for the gala, and reviewed the story they would tell about how they met. "Your college friends who recently reconnected," Elena said. "Keep it simple and consistent. Don't elaborate unless asked direct questions, and if anyone gets too personal, just smile and change the subject." "What if someone recognizes me from somewhere?" Zara asked. "I've done some local commercials, small theater productions." "Then you're an actress who's between projects. That's perfectly respectable. Many wealthy men date actresses." Elena handed her a small clutch purse that matched her dress. "Your phone, lipstick, breath mints, and emergency cash. Also Mr. Mitchell's direct number in case you get separated." "Will that happen?" Zara asked, surprised by how much the idea worried her. "Probably not, but it's always good to be prepared. These events can be overwhelming and sometimes people need a moment to step outside for air." At 5 o'clock, Zara was ready. She looked at herself in the hotel room mirror and felt like she was looking at a completely different person. The woman in the reflection was sophisticated, elegant, and confident, everything Zara hoped to project tonight. "Remember," Elena said as they prepared to leave for Ryan's penthouse where Zara would meet him for the first time, "this is a business arrangement. Be friendly, be charming, but don't let yourself get emotionally involved. Mr. Mitchell is a good man, but he's not looking for a real relationship. Don't make this harder on yourself than it needs to be." Zara nodded, but as the car pulled up to the building where Ryan lived, she felt butterflies in her stomach that had nothing to do with nerves about the gala. She was about to meet the man whose photo she had been studying for 3 days, whose life story she had memorized, whose loneliness she had somehow started to identify with. The doorman greeted them by name and escorted them to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. As they rose to the 40th floor, Zara tried to calm her racing heart. This was just a job, she reminded herself. One evening of acting, and then she could go back to her real life with enough money to solve her immediate problems. But when the elevator doors opened directly into Ryan's penthouse, and she saw him standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the city, something shifted inside her chest. He turned when he heard the elevator, and when their eyes met, she felt a connection that had nothing to do with business arrangements or fake relationships. "You must be Zara," he said, walking toward her with a smile that was even more attractive in person than it had been in his photos. "I'm Ryan. It's a pleasure to meet you." When he took her hand to shake it, she felt a spark of electricity that she definitely hadn't been expecting. Based on the slight widening of his eyes, she thought he might have felt it too. This was supposed to be simple and professional, she reminded herself. But as Ryan offered her a glass of wine and began telling her about the charity they would be supporting that evening, Zara realized that nothing about this arrangement was going to be as straightforward as she had hoped. Ryan's penthouse was like something from a magazine, all clean lines, expensive art, and windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. But what struck Zara most was how quiet it was, how empty it felt despite all the luxury. This was clearly the home of someone who spent most of his time alone. "Wine?" Ryan asked, gesturing toward a bar area that probably contained bottles worth more than Zara's annual income. "Please," she said, trying to project the confidence that Carmen and Maria had built up in her during the styling session. He poured 2 glasses of red wine and handed her one, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. Up close, he was even more handsome than his photos suggested. But there was also something vulnerable about him that hadn't come through in the professional images Elena had shown her. "So," he said, settling into a chair across from her, "Elena tells me you're an actress." "I am, though not a very successful one yet," Zara replied honestly. "Mostly local theater and commercial work while I try to book bigger roles." "That must be difficult. I imagine the entertainment industry is pretty brutal." There was genuine sympathy in his voice, and Zara found herself relaxing slightly. "It can be. But I love it, so I keep trying. What about you? Do you enjoy running a tech company, or is it just something you're good at?" Ryan looked surprised by the question, as if most people didn't bother to ask what he actually enjoyed. "I love the problem-solving aspect of it. Taking something complicated and finding a way to make it simple and useful for people. But the business side, the meetings, the networking, the public appearances, that's much harder for me." "Is that why you hired a companion for tonight instead of asking someone you actually know?" The question slipped out before Zara could stop herself, and she immediately worried she had been too direct. But Ryan just laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. "That's exactly why," he said. "I'm not good at small talk or pretending to enjoy parties. I tend to hide in corners and check my phone too much. Elena promised me that you could help me look like someone who actually wants to be at social events." "And what do I get out of this arrangement?" Zara asked, though she already knew the answer. "You get paid very well for one evening of work," Ryan said simply. "And hopefully, you get to enjoy some excellent food and wine while helping raise money for a good cause." They talked for another hour, and Zara was surprised by how easy the conversation felt. Ryan was intelligent and funny, with a self-deprecating sense of humor that made her forget how wealthy and powerful he was. He asked her thoughtful questions about her acting career, her family, her goals for the future. And when she asked him about his business or his charitable work, he answered without the rehearsed quality she had expected from someone who probably gave a lot of interviews. "I should probably tell you," Ryan said as they prepared to leave for the gala, "I'm not great at physical affection, even fake physical affection. If we need to hold hands or anything like that, just take the lead and I'll follow." Zara found his honesty endearing. "Don't worry. I'll make us both look good." "I don't doubt that," he said, and the way he looked at her made her pulse quicken. The car ride to the hotel was comfortable, filled with easy conversation about everything from movies to travel to their shared love of jazz music. Zara found herself genuinely enjoying Ryan's company, which was both wonderful and dangerous. Elena had warned her not to get emotionally involved, and she was already breaking that rule. "One more thing," Ryan said as they pulled up to the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. "If anyone asks how we met, what should we say?" Elena suggested we say we're old college friends who recently reconnected, Zara replied. "That works. And Zara?" He turned to look at her directly. "Thank you for doing this. I know it's probably not the most exciting way to spend a Saturday night." Before she could respond that she was actually looking forward to the evening, the car door was being opened by a valet, and Ryan was stepping out to offer her his hand. The moment her feet touched the red carpet leading into the hotel, Zara felt like she was stepping into a fairy tale. The hotel lobby had been transformed for the gala. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, live musicians played softly in one corner, and everywhere she looked, Zara saw people who looked like they had stepped out of fashion magazines. The women wore gowns that probably cost more than most people's cars, and the men looked comfortable and confident in their expensive tuxedos. "You okay?" Ryan asked quietly, offering her his arm. "Perfect," she said and meant it. With Ryan beside her, she felt like she belonged in this glittering world. They moved through the cocktail reception easily, with Ryan introducing her to various business associates and charity board members. Zara was pleased to discover that her research had paid off. She was able to hold intelligent conversations about Ryan's company, the charity they were supporting, and current events. Several people complimented Ryan on bringing such a charming companion, and she could see him relaxing more with each successful interaction. "You're very good at this," he murmured in her ear during a brief moment when they were alone. "So are you," she replied. "I think you're better at social situations than you give yourself credit for." An hour into the cocktail reception, Zara excused herself to use the restroom and to call the hospital to check on her grandmother. It was supposed to be a quick break, but it turned into the beginning of the worst night of her life. When she tried to return to the gala, the security guard stopped her at the entrance with words that would echo in her mind for hours afterward. "Your name isn't on the guest list." Standing outside in the cold, watching Ryan continue with his evening while she was banned from rejoining him, Zara realized that someone had orchestrated this humiliation deliberately. Someone had wanted her to fail, wanted Ryan to be embarrassed, wanted both of them to suffer. The question was who, and what they hoped to gain by destroying what had started as such a perfect evening. Before everything went wrong, the evening had been magical in ways Zara never could have anticipated. Walking into the ballroom on Ryan's arm, she felt like she was entering a fairy tale designed specifically for adults who had outgrown believing in happy endings but still secretly hoped for them. The ballroom of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel had been transformed into something that belonged in a palace. Thousands of tiny lights hung from the ceiling like captured stars, and each table was decorated with towering arrangements of white roses and orchids. The charity had spared no expense in creating an atmosphere that would loosen the purse strings of the city's wealthiest residents. "This is incredible," Zara whispered to Ryan as they paused just inside the entrance to take in the scene. "Wait until you see the auction items," Ryan replied. "Last year someone paid $50,000 for a week in Tuscany." $50,000? That's more than some people make in a year. "Different world," Ryan said with a slight shrug. "But the money goes to a good cause, so I try not to judge too harshly." Their table was near the front of the room, close to the stage where the evening's speakers and entertainment would perform. As they approached, Zara could see that their dining companions were exactly the sort of powerful, sophisticated people Elena had prepared her to meet. "Ryan." A distinguished woman in her 60s rose from her seat to greet them. "So wonderful to see you. And you must be the mystery woman we've all been hearing about." "Margaret, I'd like you to meet Zara Williams," Ryan said smoothly. "Zara, this is Margaret Hartwell, the founder of the charity we're supporting tonight." Zara shook Margaret's hand and smiled warmly. "It's such an honor to meet you, Mrs. Hartwell. I've been reading about the foundation's work with educational programs for underprivileged children. It sounds incredible." Margaret's eyes lit up with genuine pleasure. "Oh, you've done your homework? I like her already, Ryan. Please call me Margaret." As they settled into their seats, Zara was introduced to the other couples at their table, a federal judge and his wife, a prominent surgeon and her husband, and a tech entrepreneur who turned out to be one of Ryan's competitors but also, apparently, a good friend. "So Zara," said Dr. Patricia Williams, the surgeon, "Ryan tells us you're an actress. Are you working on anything interesting right now?" Zara had prepared for this question during her coaching with Elena. "I'm between projects at the moment, actually. Taking some time to read scripts and decide what direction I want my career to take next." "Smart approach," said the judge's wife. "Too many young actors take any role that comes along without thinking about how it affects their long-term goals." The conversation flowed easily from there, covering everything from the upcoming mayoral election to a new art exhibition at the Contemporary Museum. Zara found herself genuinely enjoying the discussion, and she could see Ryan looking pleased and perhaps a little surprised by how well she was fitting in. During the appetizer course, a woman at a nearby table caught Zara's attention. She was stunning in the way that only money and professional maintenance could achieve: perfectly styled blonde hair, flawless makeup, and a dress that probably cost more than Zara's rent for 6 months. But what drew Zara's attention was the way the woman kept looking at their table, and specifically at Ryan, with an expression that seemed both angry and calculating. "Who's that?" Zara asked Ryan quietly, nodding discreetly toward the blonde woman. Ryan followed her gaze and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Victoria Sterling. We used to date." "Recently?" "About a year ago. It didn't end well." Before Zara could ask for more details, the evening's program began. Margaret Hartwell took the stage to welcome everyone and speak about the Foundation's work. Her speech was moving and personal, describing children whose lives had been changed by educational opportunities that might not have existed without the Foundation's support. "Education is the great equalizer," Margaret said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "It doesn't matter where you come from or how much money your family has. When we give a child access to quality education, we give them the power to change their own life and the lives of everyone around them." Zara found herself genuinely moved by the presentation, and when she glanced at Ryan, she could see that he was equally affected. This wasn't just a social obligation for him, he genuinely cared about the cause they were supporting. During the dinner course, Ryan leaned closer to her. "You're doing amazingly well tonight. Everyone loves you." "I'm having a wonderful time," Zara replied and realized she meant it completely. "These are fascinating people and the cause is genuinely important. Plus, the food is incredible." "Better than your usual Saturday night?" Zara laughed. "My usual Saturday night involves leftover pizza and whatever's on Netflix. This is definitely an upgrade." As the evening progressed, Zara began to forget that this was a business arrangement. Ryan was attentive and charming, asking her opinion on the speakers, making her laugh with quiet observations about their table companions, ensuring that she always had fresh wine and that she was comfortable with the temperature and the noise level. When the dancing began, he offered her his hand with a slightly nervous smile. "I should warn you, I'm not the world's best dancer," he said. "Lucky for you I am," Zara replied, leading him onto the dance floor. They danced to 3 songs, and with each one, Zara felt herself falling a little more under the spell of the evening and the man whose arms she was in. Ryan was actually a better dancer than he had claimed, and holding him close felt natural and right in a way that scared and thrilled her at the same time. "Thank you," he said as they swayed to a slow ballad, "for making this so much easier than I expected." "Thank you for being nothing like what I expected," she replied without thinking. Their eyes met, and for a moment the crowded ballroom faded away. Zara could see something in Ryan's expression that looked like genuine affection, maybe even the beginning of something deeper. She wondered if he could see the same thing in her face. It was during that moment of connection, as they danced and looked into each other's eyes like a real couple falling for each other, that Zara's phone buzzed in her clutch with a call from the hospital. Her grandmother's condition had taken a turn, and the nurse needed to speak with her immediately. "I'm so sorry," she told Ryan, stepping back from their dance. "I need to take this call. It's about my grandmother." "Of course. Take all the time you need." Zara hurried toward the lobby to find a quiet place to talk to the nurse, expecting to be back in Ryan's arms within 10 minutes. She had no way of knowing that she wouldn't be allowed back into the ballroom at all, that someone had used her brief absence to set a trap that would humiliate both her and Ryan. As she walked away from the dance floor, she glanced back once to see Ryan watching her go with a warm smile. It was the last moment of the evening when everything felt perfect and full of possibility. The call from the hospital had been brief but concerning. Zara's grandmother had experienced some irregular heartbeats during the evening, and while she was stable now, the nurse wanted to keep her under closer observation for the next few hours. It wasn't an emergency, but it was enough to make Zara's hands shake as she hung up the phone in the hotel lobby. She stood by the large windows overlooking the city, taking deep breaths and trying to calm her racing heart. Her grandmother was going to be okay. The medication was working, and these small episodes were normal for someone with her condition. But the reminder of why she was here tonight, why she needed the money Ryan was paying her, brought her crashing back to reality. For a few hours, she had allowed herself to forget that this was all pretend. Dancing in Ryan's arms, laughing at his jokes, feeling genuinely appreciated by the sophisticated people at their table, it had all felt so real. But it wasn't real and she couldn't afford to forget that. After about 15 minutes, Zara made her way back toward the ballroom. She felt better after the phone call and was looking forward to rejoining Ryan for the rest of the evening. The auction was about to begin, and she was curious to see how much money these wealthy donors would actually contribute to Margaret's foundation. "Excuse me, miss," the security guard said as she approached the ballroom entrance. "I need to see your invitation." Zara paused, confused. She had walked through this same entrance multiple times during the evening without being stopped. "I was just here a few minutes ago. I'm with Ryan Mitchell at table 12. I need to see some identification and check the guest list, the guard said firmly. Something cold settled in Zara's stomach, but she pulled out her driver's license and the invitation from her clutch. The guard took both items and walked over to a podium where another staff member was checking names on a tablet. I'm sorry, miss, but your name isn't on our guest list, the guard said when he returned. Zara Williams, no record found. That's impossible, Zara said, her voice rising slightly. I've been here all evening. I came with Ryan Mitchell. We sat at table 12, we danced, we had dinner. You can ask anyone. Ma'am, I don't know how you got in earlier, but you're not authorized to be here now. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The world seemed to tilt around Zara. This couldn't be happening. She looked through the glass doors into the ballroom, where she could see Ryan standing near their table, probably wondering where she had gone. The auction was beginning and Margaret Hartwell was back on stage with a microphone. Please, Zara said, trying to keep her voice steady. Just call over to table 12 and ask for Ryan Mitchell. He's expecting me back. I can't disturb the guests during the program unless there's an emergency, the guard replied. If you know Mr. Mitchell personally, you can contact him yourself. But Zara's phone was dead, and she didn't have Ryan's number memorized. Elena had programmed it into her phone, but without power she had no way to reach him. She watched through the glass as Ryan looked around the ballroom, clearly searching for her. This is a mistake, she said desperately. Someone has made a mistake. My name was on the list 3 hours ago. Names don't just disappear from guest lists, the guard said, his tone suggesting he'd heard similar stories before. You need to leave the premises now, or I'll have to call for additional security. Other guests were starting to notice the commotion. Zara could see a few people near the entrance turning to stare, their expressions ranging from curious to judgmental. She recognized the look. She had seen it countless times when she was the only black person in predominantly white spaces. The assumption that she didn't belong, that she was probably trying to scam her way into something she hadn't earned. Fine, she said quietly, her dignity the only thing she had left to protect. I'll go. But as she turned to leave, she caught sight of someone who made her blood run cold. Victoria Sterling, Ryan's ex-girlfriend, was standing near the bar with a small group of women, and she was watching Zara's humiliation with a satisfied smile. When their eyes met across the room, Victoria raised her champagne glass in a mocking toast. Suddenly everything made sense. Someone with influence had removed Zara's name from the guest list, and Victoria Sterling was the only person at the gala who had both the motive and the connections to make that happen. She had orchestrated this entire humiliation, probably hoping to embarrass Ryan by making his hired companion look like a fraud trying to crash an exclusive party. The security guard was still waiting for Zara to leave, and more people were starting to stare. Through the glass, she could see Ryan checking his phone, probably looking for a message from her explaining where she had gone. He had no idea that she was being treated like a criminal just yards away from where he stood. Zara walked toward the hotel's exit with as much dignity as she could manage, her head held high despite the burning shame in her chest. She had never felt more humiliated in her life, but she refused to let these people see her cry. As she reached the main lobby, she heard someone behind her say, "I don't know how these people think they can just walk into private events." The words hit her like a physical blow, but she kept walking. Outside, the night air was cold against her skin, and she realized she had nowhere to go. Her hotel room had been paid for by Ryan's people for one night only, and she had checked out that morning. Her own apartment was an hour away by public transportation, and she didn't have money for a taxi. She sat down on a bench across the street from the hotel, looking up at the glittering windows of the ballroom where her fairy tale evening had turned into a nightmare. Ryan was probably still looking for her, probably worried about what had happened to her. But there was no way for her to contact him, no way to explain what had occurred. The worst part wasn't even the humiliation or the lost money, though both of those stung deeply. The worst part was that for a few hours she had allowed herself to believe that she could belong in Ryan's world, that maybe their fake relationship could become something real. She had started to care about him, had begun to imagine what it might be like if a man like that could actually fall for a woman like her. Now she knew better. She was exactly what Victoria Sterling and the security guard and the other guests thought she was. Someone who didn't belong, someone who was foolish enough to think she could pretend to be something she wasn't. As she sat on the cold bench, watching the warm light spill from the hotel windows, Zara finally allowed herself to cry. Not just for the evening that had been ruined, or for the money she wouldn't receive, or even for the grandmother whose medical bills would remain unpaid. She cried for the dreams she had allowed herself to have, and for the man inside who would probably think she had abandoned him without explanation. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, Ryan was beginning to realize she was missing, and that when he discovered what had happened to her, his reaction would surprise everyone in that ballroom, including himself. Ryan checked his phone for the third time in 10 minutes, but there were still no messages from Zara. She had been gone for nearly half an hour now, and while he understood that family phone calls could be lengthy and emotional, something felt wrong. The Zara he had gotten to know over the course of the evening wasn't the type to disappear without explanation. Looking for someone? Margaret Hartwell appeared at his elbow, following his gaze toward the ballroom entrance. My date stepped out to take a call about her grandmother, Ryan explained. But that was quite a while ago. Oh, the lovely young woman who knew so much about our educational programs? I was hoping to speak with her more about her thoughts on arts integration in schools. That's her. I should probably check to make sure everything's all right. Ryan made his way toward the lobby, nodding politely at acquaintances who tried to engage him in conversation but not stopping to chat. In the back of his mind, a worry was growing that had nothing to do with Zara's grandmother and everything to do with the way Victoria Sterling had been watching their table all evening. The hotel lobby was quieter than the ballroom, with only a few guests mingling near the bar area. Ryan approached the concierge desk, where a young man in a crisp uniform looked up expectantly. Excuse me, I'm looking for someone who would have come through here about 30 minutes ago. A woman in a blue dress, African American, very beautiful. She was taking a phone call. Oh yes, sir. She was here for a while, but she left about 15 minutes ago. Left? Ryan felt his stomach drop. Did she say where she was going? No, sir, but she seemed upset. Is everything all right? Instead of answering, Ryan pulled out his phone and called the number Elena had given him for Zara. It went straight to voicemail, which meant her phone was either turned off or dead. He tried twice more with the same result. Something was definitely wrong. The Zara he had spent the evening with wouldn't have left without saying goodbye, wouldn't have abandoned their arrangement without explanation. She was too professional, too considerate, and if he was being honest with himself, too interested in him personally to simply disappear. Ryan walked back toward the ballroom, his mind racing through possibilities. Had there been a family emergency that required her to leave immediately? Had she become ill? Or had something else happened, something that had forced her to leave against her will? As he approached the ballroom entrance, he noticed one of the security guards speaking into his radio. On impulse, Ryan approached him. Excuse me, I'm Ryan Mitchell. I'm looking for my companion, Zara Williams. She stepped out about 30 minutes ago and hasn't returned. The guard's expression shifted slightly, becoming more alert. Mr. Mitchell? Yes, sir. I believe there was some confusion about the guest list earlier. What kind of confusion? A young woman matching that description tried to re-enter the ballroom about 20 minutes ago, but her name wasn't on our authorized guest list. She claimed to be with you, but we have protocols about admitting people who aren't properly registered. Ryan felt a surge of anger so powerful it surprised him. You turned away my guest because her name wasn't on a list? Sir, we have to follow security protocols. Anyone can claim to know someone, but without proper authorization. She was wearing a blue gown, she had an invitation, and she's been at my table all evening. Did you think to verify her story before throwing her out? The guard looked uncomfortable now. She didn't have any identification that connected her to you specifically, and the guest list is maintained by the event organizers. If there was an error. Ryan was already pulling out his phone, calling Elena's emergency number. She answered on the second ring. Elena, this is Ryan Mitchell. There's been a problem. Zara was denied re-entry to the gala because her name allegedly isn't on the guest list. How is that possible? That's impossible, Elena said immediately. I personally confirmed her registration 3 days ago. Let me call the event coordinator right now. While Ryan waited for Elena to investigate, he found himself scanning the ballroom for Victoria Sterling. She was at the bar, surrounded by her usual crowd of socialite friends, but when she noticed him looking at her, her smile was too innocent, too satisfied. Ryan walked directly toward her, his jaw set in a way that made other guests step aside to let him pass. Victoria, he said when he reached her group, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Of course, darling, she said, handing her champagne glass to one of her friends. How lovely to see you tonight. And what an interesting companion you brought. They stepped away from her friends and Ryan kept his voice low but his tone was ice cold. What did you do? I'm sorry? I don't know what you mean. Zara's name was removed from the guest list. She was denied re-entry and forced to leave. That doesn't happen by accident at an event like this. Victoria's smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered in her eyes. Ryan, I have no idea what you're talking about. If your little actress friend had some kind of problem with security, that's hardly my fault. Actress friend? Ryan repeated. How did you know she was an actress? I never mentioned that to anyone. For just a moment, Victoria's composure slipped. Then she recovered with a laugh that sounded like broken glass. Darling, it's obvious. The way she was trying so hard to fit in, asking all those careful questions about everyone's work. Plus, she's far too beautiful and far too eager to please to be anything other than a professional. A professional what, exactly? Oh, come now, Ryan. We both know what kind of woman agrees to be a wealthy man's companion for the evening. I'm not judging, men have needs, and if you're not ready for a real relationship. Ryan felt something dangerous rise in his chest. Are you suggesting that Zara is a prostitute? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply observing that she seemed a bit transactional. Very focused on saying all the right things, being everything you wanted her to be. It's actually quite sad when you think about it. His phone buzzed with a call from Elena, but Ryan ignored it. Even if your disgusting assumptions were true, which they're not, what gives you the right to interfere in my personal life? I wasn't interfering in anything, Victoria said, but her voice had lost its sweetness. I was protecting you from embarrassment. Do you have any idea how it looked, you bringing some hired girl to Margaret Hartwell's charity gala? People are talking, Ryan. They're saying you've gotten so desperate that you have to pay for female companionship. The only person I see talking about it is you, Ryan replied. And the only person who seems to know details about Zara's employment is you. Which means you did your research, didn't you? You found out where I met her, and then you used your connections to have her removed from the guest list. Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. She doesn't belong here, Ryan. She doesn't belong in our world. I did you a favor by making that clear before you could embarrass yourself further. Our world. Ryan's voice was deadly quiet now. We don't have a world, Victoria. We haven't had anything for over a year and we never will again. What Zara and I have is none of your business. What you have. Victoria laughed, but it sounded desperate now. Ryan, you paid her to be here. Whatever you think you have with her ends when the check clears. Ryan stared at her for a long moment, seeing clearly for the first time the petty, cruel person she had always been. You're right about one thing. What Zara and I have isn't transactional. It's not about money or social status or trying to impress people like you. It's real, which is something you've never understood. He turned away from her without another word and pulled out his phone to call Elena back. But as he walked away, he heard Victoria's voice behind him, sharp with anger. She's using you, Ryan. Whatever sob story she told you, whatever act she's putting on, it's all about the money. Women like that always are. Ryan didn't turn around, but Victoria's words confirmed what he had already suspected. She hadn't just had Zara removed from the guest list. She had done research, found out about Zara's financial situation, and was now trying to use that information to poison whatever feelings Ryan might have developed. Which meant Victoria knew exactly how much those feelings had grown over the course of one evening, and exactly how much it would hurt him to lose the woman who had made him feel less alone than he had in years. Now he just had to find Zara and convince her that whatever had happened tonight, they could work through it together. Elena's voice was tight with anger when Ryan finally called her back. I've spoken with 3 different people at the event management company. Zara's name was definitely on the original guest list, but it was removed at 4:30 this afternoon by someone claiming to represent your office. Someone claiming to represent me? Ryan was standing in the hotel lobby now, away from the noise and crowd of the gala. Who would have that kind of access? That's what I'm trying to find out. The person who called had detailed information about your account, your previous events with us, even your preferences for table arrangements. It wasn't some random person making a lucky guess. Ryan closed his eyes, pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. Victoria Sterling. She would have that kind of information from when we dated? She attended events with me, she knew my assistants, she probably still has contacts at some of the companies I work with regularly. Mr. Mitchell, if someone deliberately sabotaged this evening, that's not just unprofessional behavior. Depending on what exactly was said and how they gained access to your account information, it could be illegal. I don't care about legal action right now, Ryan said. I need to find Zara. She's out there somewhere thinking that I abandoned her, or that this was all some kind of setup. Her phone is dead and I don't know where she lives or how to reach her. I have her address and emergency contact information in her file, Elena said immediately. I'll text you everything I have. But Mr. Mitchell, there's something else you should know. What? When I called the event management company, they told me that whoever removed Zara's name also made some additional comments. They claimed that Ms. Williams was unstable, that she had been making threats against you, and that she might try to cause a scene at the gala. Ryan felt sick. They made it sound like she was dangerous? Exactly. Which explains why security was so quick to remove her and so reluctant to verify her story. They thought they were protecting you from a potentially threatening individual. The cruelty of it took Ryan's breath away. Victoria hadn't just wanted to embarrass Zara, she had wanted to destroy her completely, to make sure that even if the truth came out later, Zara would be remembered as someone unstable and threatening rather than as an innocent victim. Send me her information, Ryan said. I'm leaving the gala now. Sir, before you go, do you want me to contact Ms. Williams and explain what happened? I could arrange for her to receive the full payment we agreed upon, plus additional compensation for what she's been through. Ryan paused, considering the offer. It would be the professional way to handle the situation, the way that would cause the least additional drama for everyone involved. Elena could smooth things over, Zara would get her money, and they could all pretend this had been nothing more than an unfortunate misunderstanding. But Ryan realized he didn't want this to be handled professionally. He didn't want to send Elena to clean up the mess with money and apologies. He wanted to find Zara himself, wanted to look her in the eye when he told her what had really happened, wanted to see if the connection he had felt between them was strong enough to survive this kind of sabotage. No, he said finally. I need to handle this myself. Just send me her address. 20 minutes later, Ryan was in the back of a car heading toward a part of the city he rarely visited. Zara lived in a modest apartment building in a neighborhood that was safe but far from luxurious. As they drove through streets lined with small restaurants and family-owned shops, Ryan realized how little he actually knew about Zara's real life. He knew she was an actress, knew she was struggling financially, knew she cared deeply about her grandmother. But he didn't know what her apartment looked like, what she did on weekends when she wasn't working, what her dreams were beyond just paying the bills. Their entire relationship, if it could even be called that, had existed in the artificial bubble of his penthouse in the charity gala. Maybe Victoria had been right about one thing. Maybe what he thought he felt for Zara was just an illusion created by expensive wine and elegant surroundings. Maybe when he found her in her real environment, the magic would disappear and they would both realize they had nothing in common beyond a business arrangement that had gone slightly off script. But as the car pulled up in front of Zara's building, Ryan found himself hoping desperately that Victoria had been wrong about everything. He hoped that what he had felt dancing with Zara was real, that her laughter at his jokes had been genuine, that the way she had looked at him when they were alone together meant something more than professional courtesy. The building didn't have a doorman, so Ryan had to use the intercom system to try to reach Zara's apartment. He pressed the button for 4B and waited, his heart pounding in a way that reminded him of being a teenager asking someone to prom. No answer. He tried again, holding the button longer this time. Still nothing. It was possible she wasn't home yet. She could still be traveling back from the hotel, or she might have gone somewhere else entirely. But it was also possible that she was upstairs, saw his name on the intercom, and simply didn't want to talk to him. Ryan pulled out his phone and tried calling her number again, even though he knew her phone was dead. This time, however, it rang once before going to voicemail, which meant she had probably found a way to charge it. Zara, it's Ryan, he said after the beep. I know what happened tonight. I know someone deliberately had your name removed from the guest list, and I know who did it. Please call me back or let me come up so I can explain everything. This wasn't your fault and it definitely wasn't mine. We need to talk. He hung up and waited, staring up at the windows of the building, trying to guess which one might be hers. Most of the apartments were dark, but there were lights in a few windows, including one on the 4th floor that might have been 4B. After 10 minutes with no response, Ryan tried the intercom again. This time, a voice answered immediately, but it wasn't Zara. She doesn't want to talk to you. The voice was older, female, and carried the kind of authority that suggested this was someone who cared about Zara enough to protect her from unwanted visitors. Are you her grandmother? Ryan asked. I'm her neighbor, Mrs. Johnson. And she's been sitting in my apartment crying for the past hour because of whatever you people did to her tonight. Ma'am, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Someone sabotaged the event, made it look like Zara didn't belong there. I've been trying to find her all evening to explain what really happened. There was a long pause, and Ryan could hear muffled voices in the background, as if Mrs. Johnson was consulting with someone else. She says to tell you that she got the message loud and clear. She doesn't belong in your world and she's not interested in pretending otherwise anymore. That's not the message I wanted to send, Ryan said urgently. Please just give me 5 minutes to explain. If she still doesn't want to see me after that, I'll leave her alone. Another pause, more muffled conversation. You can come up, Mrs. Johnson said finally. Apartment 4C. But if you say anything that makes that girl cry any more than she already has, you'll be dealing with me. As Ryan climbed the 4 flights of stairs to Mrs. Johnson's apartment, he tried to organize his thoughts. He needed to find the right words to explain not just what Victoria had done, but why it mattered so much to him that Zara understand the truth. He needed to find a way to tell her that somewhere between the cocktail hour and the dancing, his feelings had shifted from professional interest to something much more personal and much more frightening. By the time he reached the 4th floor, Ryan knew exactly what he needed to say. The question was whether Zara would be willing to listen, and whether she would believe him when he told her that the evening they had shared was the most real thing that had happened to him in years. Mrs. Johnson was exactly what Ryan had expected. A woman in her 70s with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who had spent decades taking care of other people. She opened the door to apartment 4C wearing a floral housecoat and an expression that suggested she was prepared to throw him out if he said one wrong word. You must be the billionaire, she said, looking him up and down. You're younger than I expected. Yes, ma'am. Is Zara here? She's here, but she's not sure she wants to see you. That girl has been through enough tonight without having to deal with more disappointment. Mrs. Johnson stepped aside to let him into her small, comfortable living room. It was the opposite of his penthouse in every way, crowded with family photos and knitted blankets, smelling like coffee and vanilla candles, warm in a way that had nothing to do with expensive heating systems. Zara was sitting on the couch with her back to the door, still wearing the beautiful blue gown but with her hair down and her shoes off. She looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way that made Ryan's chest ache. Zara, he said softly. She turned to look at him and Ryan could see that she had been crying. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes were red, and there was something defeated in her expression that he had never seen before. You found me, she said. I'm surprised you bothered. Ryan moved closer but stopped when he saw her tense up. Of course I bothered. When I realized you were missing, I spent the rest of the evening trying to figure out what happened to you. What happened is that I got reminded of my place, Zara said, her voice flat. I thought I could pretend to be someone I'm not for one night, but people like Victoria Sterling made sure I remembered that I don't actually belong in your world. Victoria Sterling doesn't represent my world, Ryan said urgently. She represents everything I hate about wealth and privilege and the way some people use their money to hurt others. It doesn't matter what she represents. What matters is that she was right. I was hired help, pretending to be your girlfriend so you wouldn't have to attend a social event alone. When it came down to it, I was exactly what she said I was. Mrs. Johnson was bustling around in the kitchen, making tea and pretending not to listen to their conversation. But Ryan could feel her attention, could sense that Zara had at least one person in her corner who would protect her if this conversation went badly. Can I sit down? Ryan asked. Zara shrugged, which he took as permission. He sat on the opposite end of the couch, close enough to talk to her directly but far enough away that she wouldn't feel crowded. Victoria had your name removed from the guest list, he said without preamble. She called the event management company this afternoon, claiming to represent my office, and told them you were unstable and potentially dangerous. She made sure that when you tried to come back into the ballroom, security would see you as a threat rather than as my guest. Zara's eyes widened slightly. How do you know that? Because I investigated. I called Elena, she called the event company, and we traced exactly what happened and when. Victoria wanted to humiliate both of us, but especially you. She wanted to make sure you felt like you didn't belong, and she wanted to embarrass me by making it look like my date had abandoned me. Why would she do that? Ryan ran a hand through his hair, trying to find the right words. Because she's jealous, and because she's cruel, and because she could see that what was happening between us tonight was real in a way that what she and I had never was. Zara stared at him for a long moment. What was happening between us? You know what was happening. We both felt it. When we were dancing, when we were talking at dinner, when we were alone in my apartment before the gala, that wasn't acting, Zara. At least not for me. But it was supposed to be acting, Zara said quietly. We both agreed it was just business. And then we met each other and it stopped being business pretty quickly. Ryan leaned forward, trying to catch her eyes. I've been to 100 events like tonight's gala. I've never had a better time at any of them, and it had nothing to do with the food or the wine or the entertainment. It was because of you. Mrs. Johnson appeared with a tray of tea, setting it down on the coffee table between them. Sugar and cream are there if you want them, she said to Ryan. And young man, I hope you're being honest with this girl because she's been through enough heartbreak for one lifetime. I'm being honest, Ryan said, accepting a cup of tea gratefully. More honest than I've been with anyone in a long time. After Mrs. Johnson retreated to the kitchen again, Zara finally looked directly at Ryan. Even if what you're saying is true, even if Victoria sabotaged the evening, it doesn't change the basic facts. You hired me to be your companion. I needed the money to pay for my grandmother's medical care. This whole thing started as a transaction. Lots of relationships start for practical reasons, Ryan said. That doesn't mean they can't become something more. But what kind of something more could we possibly have? You live in a penthouse and attend charity galas where people spend more on wine than I make in a month. I live in a fourth-floor walk-up and count quarters to do laundry. We're from completely different worlds. So we'll figure out how to bridge those worlds, Ryan said. People do it all the time. Zara shook her head. Tonight proved that won't work. There will always be people like Victoria who see me as someone who doesn't belong, who's only there because of money. And maybe they won't be wrong. They are wrong, Ryan said firmly. You belonged at that gala more than half the people there. You knew more about the charity's work than most of the board members. You were kinder to the staff, more interesting to talk to, and more genuinely engaged with the cause than anyone else I met tonight. That's not the same as belonging. Belonging isn't about money, Zara. It's about character and intelligence and compassion. You have all of those things. Victoria Sterling has none of them, despite having more money than she could spend in 3 lifetimes. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping their tea while Mrs. Johnson moved around in the kitchen. Finally, Zara spoke again. What do you want from me, Ryan? What are you hoping will happen here? I want to take you on a real date, Ryan said simply. Not a business arrangement, not a fake relationship for show. A real date where we can get to know each other better and see if what we felt tonight can grow into something lasting. And then what? If we actually like each other, if this becomes a real relationship, what happens when you want to introduce me to your friends or take me to business events? Tonight proved that your world isn't ready for someone like me. Then we'll change my world, Ryan said. Or we'll find a new world that works for both of us. Zara, I've spent years surrounded by people who only cared about my money. You're the first person in longer than I can remember who made me feel like I was interesting just for who I am. Do you really think I'm going to let Victoria Sterling or anyone else take that away from us? Zara was quiet for so long that Ryan began to worry she was going to ask him to leave. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was falling for you tonight. Before everything went wrong, when we were dancing and talking and laughing together, I was starting to care about you in a way that scared me. Because I knew it was supposed to be fake and I knew I was setting myself up to get hurt. You don't have to get hurt, Ryan said. We can take this as slowly as you want. We can figure out how to make it work together. Can we really? Or are you just feeling guilty about what happened tonight? Ryan set down his teacup and moved closer to her on the couch. Zara, look at me. She met his eyes, and he could see all her uncertainty and hope and fear reflected there. I came here tonight because I couldn't stand the thought of you believing that what happened at the gala was your fault, or that I didn't care enough to find out what went wrong. But I'm still here, sitting in your neighbor's living room drinking tea and trying to convince you to give me a real chance, because I think you might be the most amazing woman I've ever met. That's not guilt talking. That's not some savior complex or rich guy's whim. That's me being more honest about my feelings than I've been in years. Zara studied his face for a long moment, and Ryan held his breath, waiting for her answer. 6 months later, Zara stood in front of the mirror in her new apartment, a place that was bigger than her old one but still modest by Ryan's standards, still unmistakably hers. She was getting ready for another charity gala, but this time everything was different. This time she belonged there not because someone had hired her to attend, but because she had spent months working with the organization as a volunteer, helping them develop educational programs that combined arts and literacy. You ready? Ryan called from the living room. Almost, she called back, putting on the earrings he had given her for her birthday, not diamonds because she had told him diamonds made her nervous, but vintage pearl drops that had belonged to his grandmother. When she walked into the living room, Ryan looked up from his phone and smiled the way he had been smiling at her for 6 months now, like she was the best part of any day that included her. You look beautiful, he said, standing to kiss her cheek. But then you always do. Even when I'm wearing paint-stained jeans and working on set pieces for the community theater? Especially then. They had taken things slowly, exactly as Ryan had promised that night in Mrs. Johnson's living room. Their first real date had been coffee and a walk through the art museum, public enough that Zara felt safe, casual enough that she could wear her own clothes and be herself. Their second date had been dinner at a small restaurant in her neighborhood, where Ryan was definitely overdressed but gamely tried to eat Ethiopian food with his hands while she laughed at his technique. It had taken 3 months before she agreed to attend another high society event with him, and only then because it was supporting a cause she genuinely cared about. This time, when people asked how they met, they told the truth, that they had been introduced through a mutual acquaintance and discovered they had more in common than either of them had expected. Some people in Ryan's social circle had been skeptical at first, especially when word got around about what Victoria Sterling had done at the Hartwell Foundation Gala. But Zara had won them over the same way she had won over Ryan, by being genuinely interested in their causes, asking thoughtful questions, and contributing her own ideas and energy to the projects she cared about. Victoria herself had left the city in February, after her behavior at the gala became widely known and several organizations quietly asked her not to renew her board memberships. Zara had felt almost sorry for her, almost. "How's your grandmother doing?" Ryan asked as they waited for their car to arrive. "The new medication is working well. She's been asking when you're coming to visit again. This weekend if you want. I promise to bring more of those cookies she likes." Ryan had met Nana Johnson on their 4th date, when Zara finally felt comfortable enough to introduce him to the most important person in her life. He had been nervous, more nervous than Zara had ever seen him, but Nana had taken one look at the way he treated her granddaughter and given him her stamp of approval. "That boy looks at you like you hung the moon," she had told Zara later. "And more importantly, he listens when you talk. You keep that one." The car arrived, and as they settled into the back seat, Zara reached for Ryan's hand. It still gave her a little thrill, the way their fingers fit together perfectly, the way he absently rubbed his thumb across her knuckles when he was thinking about something else. "Nervous about tonight?" he asked. "A little. It's the first time I'll be presenting my program proposal to this particular group of donors." Over the past few months, Zara had discovered that her real passion wasn't just acting, but using theater and storytelling to help children develop literacy skills. She had started volunteering with an after-school program in her old neighborhood, and the success of her pilot project had caught the attention of several education-focused foundations. "They're going to love it," Ryan said confidently. "You've helped 3 different schools improve their reading scores already. The data speaks for itself. Says the man who's always been good with numbers. Says the man who's watched you work with those kids and seen how much they adore you. You have a gift, Zara. Tonight is just giving other people the chance to recognize it." When they arrived at the hotel, the same Grand Metropolitan where their fake relationship had ended and their real one had begun, Zara felt a moment of anxiety. But Ryan squeezed her hand and smiled at her. "Different night, different people, different us," he said quietly. "We've got this." He was right. As they walked into the ballroom, Zara felt the confidence that had taken her months to build. She knew she belonged here now, not because of Ryan's money or connections, but because she had earned her place through her work and her passion for helping others. Margaret Hartwell spotted them immediately and hurried over with a warm smile. "Zara, I'm so excited to hear your presentation tonight. The board has been buzzing about your literacy program all week. Thank you for the opportunity, Margaret. I'm looking forward to sharing what we've accomplished so far." As the evening progressed, Zara found herself genuinely enjoying the conversations, the networking, and even the formal presentation she gave about expanding arts-based literacy programs to underserved communities. When she finished speaking, the applause was enthusiastic and sustained, and 3 different foundation leaders approached her immediately to discuss potential partnerships. "I'm proud of you," Ryan said during a quiet moment while she was taking a break from answering questions about her program. "For what?" "For becoming exactly who you were meant to be. For not letting what happened last time make you smaller or less confident. For proving that you belong anywhere you choose to be." "I had help," Zara said, looking up at him. "I had someone who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. You would have figured it out eventually. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." "Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to figure it out alone." Later that evening, as they slow danced to the same type of music they had danced to 6 months ago, Zara reflected on how much had changed. She was still the same person who had grown up in a modest apartment and worried about paying bills, but she was also someone who had learned that belonging wasn't about money or background, it was about finding your purpose and pursuing it with integrity. "Can I tell you something?" Ryan said as they swayed together. "Always. That night 6 months ago when Victoria had you thrown out of the gala, I thought it was the worst thing that could have happened to us. And now I think it might have been the best thing. If she hadn't sabotaged that evening, we might have just completed our business arrangement and never seen each other again. We might have convinced ourselves that what we felt was just the artificial intimacy of playing pretend, instead of discovering that it was real all along. Exactly. As the song ended and they remained in each other's arms, Zara thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with desperation and a need for money, but it had become something neither of them had expected, a partnership built on genuine respect, shared values and love that had grown stronger with each day they chose to trust each other. "Ryan," she said quietly. "Yes." "What happens next?" He pulled back to look at her, his eyes serious but warm. "Whatever we want to happen. We write our own story from here." "I like the sound of that." "Good," he said, spinning her once before pulling her close again. "Because I have some ideas about where our story goes next and I think you're going to like them." As they danced together in the same ballroom where they had once been separated by cruelty and misunderstanding, Zara realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories were the ones that began with the most unlikely circumstances. Sometimes the fairy tale wasn't about being rescued by someone with money and power. Sometimes it was about two people choosing to rescue each other over and over again, until they built something that could weather any storm. Their story had started with a lie, but it had become the most honest thing in both of their lives. And as Ryan spun her around one more time, making her laugh the way he had been making her laugh for 6 months now, Zara knew that this was just the beginning of the life they were going to build together. Outside, snow was beginning to fall on the city, covering everything in a blanket of white that made the world look new and full of possibility. Inside, two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way continued to dance, safe in the knowledge that they had learned the most important lesson of all, that love isn't about deserving each other or belonging to the same world, but about choosing each other every single day, no matter what obstacles the world puts in your way. The billionaire had hired a companion for one night, but what he had found was a partner for life. And the struggling actress who had taken a job to pay her grandmother's medical bills had discovered that the most valuable thing she could receive wasn't money at all. It was being seen, understood, and cherished for exactly who she was. As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave together, Zara caught sight of their reflection in one of the ballroom's mirrors. They looked like they belonged together, like they had always belonged together, like the 6 months of doubt and growth and learning to trust had simply been preparation for this moment of absolute certainty. "Ready to go home?" Ryan asked. "Ready," Zara replied, and meant it with her whole heart. Their fairy tale had begun with humiliation and ended with triumph, had started with pretense and ended with truth, had commenced with loneliness and concluded with love. It was better than any story she could have written for herself, and it was only the first chapter of the life they were going to share.